Now, I am about to say something that hasn't been said on LBGSubrewards games in about a year. Hello, YouTube, and welcome to the Retro Arcade. For the first time in a matter of a year nearly, the Retro Arcade has returned, but it is new and improved. Now, before we start this video, you already know what this video is by the title probably, I'm basically going to say what is new and improved. Now, before, what we did with the Retro Arcade is we done mini-series in it. Now, that's not going to happen, however, what will happen now is we will do information about retro consoles, information maybe about retro games. That'll be down to you, your choice if you want that, and let me know in the comments. And basically, then we will do we'll do a video maybe on the original Halo that I actually have, maybe a video on Medal of Honor Allied Assault, and we'll only do one video for the game instead of more than one. Which makes it more like a feel of a retro arcade. Now, I am in the process of trying to acquire a way of capturing my Dreamcast games. I am in the process, I haven't got that far yet, but I do have, because I have a few retro games on my tablet, because I've upgraded my tablet, I am now able to capture them with something called the video shadow play. Because as I'm aware of, that is actually on, I will remember what I was going to say, the Shield tablet. So, I am hoping I can record Sonic CD, Sonic the Hedgehog 2, and Tomb Raider 1 at the moment. That is what I should be able to record. They are re-releases, however the graphics and the gameplay has not been improved. It's the same basically, it's just that you've got the sticks on the screen. That would be the only downside to it. But without further ado, let's begin. Now, as you can gather from the title, today we will be doing an overview of the Sega Dreamcast. Now, we've slightly done some videos on the Dreamcast and Sega themselves as a console developer. However, this one is going to be in the new and improved Retro Arcade. Now, as you're aware of, this has actually been recorded in the process of LBGS Games restructuring. So this is prepared for LBGS Games when it returns. So, without further ado, let's begin. So, the Dreamcast is basically a home video game console released by Sega. Now, at this time when the Dreamcast was released, nowadays, as you know, we're used to worldwide releases, and Japan actually getting it last. Now, at this time when the Dreamcast was actually released, it was vice versa. There was no worldwide releases usually, and Japan actually got it first. So, basically, it was released in November 27th, 1998 in Japan. September 9th, 1999, the symbolic 9999 in North America, and it was released on October 14th, 1999 in Europe. It was the very first in the 6th generation, and if you don't know, that was before the PlayStation 2 was announced and released, the Nintendo GameCube and the Microsoft Xbox. Now, bearing in mind Sony and Nintendo was already still working on the PlayStation and N64 respectively to their consoles, and if you wonder, I mean the original PlayStation, they were still working because this was so early in the 6th generation due to the Saturn's failure. And now, I'm not saying the Saturn is a very bad console. From what I've seen, I could dream of trying to program for it. I could have a field day. I'm not saying I'm good at that, but I would love to program a game for the Saturn. I don't own one, but I would love to see it in action as well. However, I can't. Now, it was basically Sega's final home console, and it ended Sega's company, Sega as a company's 18 years in the video game market. Now, what made the Dreamcast so unique, before we get on to pretty much what a bit more detail is about the system, is when you look at like the PlayStation, the original one, and the N64. Now, the N64 had a kind of more mutated, like I would say, version of this. However, it didn't have the features and the unique features that the VMU had. Now, the Sega Dreamcast had a VMU. Now, I will try and get a picture up if I remember right now for you. Basically, a VMU had a standard one, which was made by Sega, 128 kilobytes. It had a screen on it that you could actually save your games, and you could actually play not the actual Dreamcast games. You have mini games you can play on the go on the VMU. And obviously had an A, B mode, sleep, and a D-pad kind of thing on it. Now, they did do third-party bigger ones, but these, like the 4 megabyte one, actually lacked the screen. It was only a card now. That is basically, and I shall get into more of the technical features in a minute of the Dreamcast. In a bit more description of the Dreamcast, and this is from the Wikipedia page, which I should remember to actually put in the description, and I will read this too. It says basically, in opposite to the Sega Saturn's unsuccessful expensive hardware, the Dreamcast was basically designed to lower the costs of making a console. And the best way of putting this, as they put it, and I'm trying not to say it exactly to the T, it basically says off-the-shelf components this was used. And basically what that means, if you don't know, I'm not saying you don't, but if you don't know, guys, all that basically means is if we went into, like, for example, I live in the UK, I've got PC World. If I went into PC World right now, and I found an Intel i7 or an AMD 8-core processor or a 16-core processor, if they exist, I don't think they do yet, and I go, I want that. That is on the shelf, which you'll find a lot of consoles before had custom chips. They had, and basically the Saturn was customized. It was, if you don't know, the Saturn had 8 processors. It had 2 for CPU, 2 for GPU, and I think it was then distributed between audio and something else. And basically it included a Hiachi SH4 CPU and an NEC PowerVR2 GPU. It was released in Japan and had a not very good reception. However, it had a very successful US launch because of its very large marketing campaign. However, it declined the interest in it because Sony built the hype for the PlayStation 2. And this is how it basically ended. Sega, really, after that. They keep price cutting it, but what you got to remember is when you price cut it down to, let's say, the Dreamcast cost £150 to produce per unit. When you price cut it down to £100 for a console, what you've got to realise is you're now making a loss of 50, and if this is not selling, and you're producing, or selling, let me rephrase that into a better term, and you're producing these consoles, you're making a loss. And this is how Sega really bled money. Dreamcast was not as much to blame as the Saturn, however it did have some blame really. However, the main blame is down to how the Dreamcast, what components was made, same with the Saturn. However, there is some blame on Sony, but it's not totally their fault. They didn't know when they built the hype for the PlayStation 2 that it was going to fly off the shelves. They didn't know that. It's not like they could proceed, and this is true actually. If you search it up, they didn't know that the PlayStation 2 was going to become the best-selling console. If you actually search that up, that's not me being a PlayStation fanboy, as some people are saying. I'm not one anyway. That is actually true. If you actually search that up, the PlayStation 2 sold 157 million units, and no consoles come close, even a handheld. And I will try and leave a link in the description to prove that. Right, and basically, they lost a lot of money. And they changed in leadership, and basically they discontinued the Dreamcast on March 31st, 2001, and they basically restructured themselves as a third-party developer. And 9.13 million Dreamcasts was sold worldwide. It was more than that, I think, however, in the end, because they had to clear the stock, I think. But it was considered very ahead of its time, because if you remember, in 1998, right, all you really had was the Saturn's cartridge kind of netlink. And before that, the preceded, I don't know what internet was the SNES. Had some sort of internet, kind of morphed internet capability. I'm not 100% sure what it was. But it was some sort of morph. And that was only in Japan. It never got released over here. That never did. However, the Dreamcast at first, when it first launched, came with a 36K modem, I think, in Japan, and then when it was re-released, it came with a 52, I'm sure it was. And it actually had internet, and eventually in America and Japan a broadband adapter was released. However, that was never seen the light of day in Europe, because by the time it was going to be released, the Dreamcast was discontinued. You'll actually find it if you actually own a Dreamcast and you want a broadband adapter, they're very expensive. They're like through the roof. If I use an example here, right, I'll go on Amazon, just while we're talking about this. And this is probably going to be where it's down, isn't it? It isn't good. If I actually go on Amazon, I've got to be careful here because I'm actually signed in. And we actually have a look. BBA. broadband. Okay, maybe it doesn't like that. Broadband adapter. I used broadband adapter with the disc. Costs £198, and that's used. And it's Japan. I think on eBay they can go from anywhere new from £200 to £400, I think, because they're so rare it's unreal. And then especially if they're already in Japan and America, you've got to import them. Which then if you're in Europe, it costs import tax and all that. You roughly, if you try and pay for one from Japan and America, you want to try and get one that's already been imported. Trying to pay for one from Japan or America, you're looking at 250 to like £450. Now, I'm not saying it's useless to do that, because it's not. If you actually do that, you can use special servers and I think a private servers to actually play the Dreamcast online. And that is actually true as well. You can actually do that. However, it is a lot of money. I am going to say that it's a lot of money for one. But anyway, let's get back on to topic. It was considered ahead of its time, the Dreamcast was, because it had, its library contained 700 games, I think, in the end, by the time it was discontinued. And that was in 3 years, I think. Yeah, 3 years in North America and Europe. Because it actually, if you find again, Australia was actually released on November 30th, 1999. It was actually released later in Australia again. So, 2 years in Europe, North America and Australia. However, 3 years in Japan. The lifespan was, and it had, I think its library, I don't think it was in each, I think it was in all of them. It was 700 games in a matter of 3 to 2 years. That's impressive, very impressive. It could be more, I could be very wrong there, but basically, now let's get into the technical specifications. Now, the Dreamcast had a, as I said, Hiachi SH4 32-bit RISC processor, basically, and it was clocked at 200 MHz. At that time, you're looking at, I think the highest was Nintendo, I think, and I will double check that. I'm sure it was 96. I will check if you give me a second. It was, let's have a look. It was a 64-bit, at that time when this was first released, 64-bit processor at 93 MHz. So at the time that the Dreamcast was first released, it actually had 100 MHz over what the competition had, at least. And 40 MHz over in graphics. So, basically, after that, it had RAM, which is 16 megabytes, which at that time, now you look at it, we've got like 8 gigabytes. At that time, that was revolutionary, 16 meg. And 8 GPU megabytes as well. Now, if you don't know, GPU is video RAM. Now, your video RAM deals with graphics kind of side of it, which your normal RAM can deal with data transfer, and other things, data transfer, holding data to transfer to the storage and stuff like that. Whereas your GPU RAM deals with video textures. It can deal with your graphics resolution. This is why you see a lot, if you look at a lot of PC, when people talk about 4K resolutions, if you have a PC, you need to have a very beefy kind of video RAM on your graphics card, because you basically need it for the resolution. Now, as I said previously, I had 128 kilobyte VMU, which was its storage. Now, it could display in RF modular, composite video, S-video, RGB SCART, and actually VGA. Now, as I'm aware of, this was one of the only consoles that could do it. It didn't come standard with it. However, if you had a Dreamcast VGA box, you could actually, and I will actually have a look, I'm sure. Yeah, you plug, this is a third party one that this actually shows. Basically, you can actually put the serial port in, you get a VGA cable, you put the serial port. Sorry guys, it's quite early in the morning. Basically, you put the port in for the AV, you have your VGA box, you put the VGA cable into the box, and then put that into the TV. about 90% of games are compatible with it. However, there is some that aren't. Now, it had 100 MHz PowerVR2 integrated with the system's ASIC graphics chip. Now, at the time, again, that was revolutionary. There was only about 40 MHz difference between it and the competition. However, you're looking at like 60 MHz. However, when other consoles released, like the 6th gen, it became obsolete. However, now let's get onto it. Now, this is what made the Dreamcast so unique, really, and it was the only console to use this format. Now, it's not CD, mini CD that is unique about it. It can read CDs and it can read mini CDs. However, it used a 1 GB GD-ROM. You'll probably find everyone's now looking at the screen and listening to this thinking, what's GD-ROM? I don't know what that is. If you don't know what the Dreamcast is, obviously. What's GD-ROM? I've never heard of that. And don't worry, I've got you covered. Now, GD-ROM is an abbreviation of Gigabyte Disk Read-Only Memory. It is an optical disc format that was made entirely by Sega, and I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce the other name. Because I will butcher it. However, basically what it is, because it's the bits in the disc are actually more stacked, or packed even, closely together, which means you can get a gigabyte. Now, they tried to use this, basically, to combat piracy, but oh my god, they shot themselves in the foot with piracy, basically. Not on purpose. They accidentally shot themselves in the foot. Basically, originally they planned to use mil CDs. Now, if you don't know, mil CDs are basically, at the time, this was to basically make, I'm trying to think the best way to put this, you could play music CDs with menus and choices in it and what you want to play. Now, what the problem that actually led to, and now there is more of a story to this than that, is when you use mil CDs, that enables CDRs. Pretty much, and it actually kind of enabled CDRs in this perspective. You could actually use CDRs because of the mil CDs. Now, the problem, and this is from research, I will tell you, the problem that actually left is when you use CDRs, you can burn games. Now, at the time, you burnt games, there was no online like the today, where if you burnt a game, or something like that, something with the console, you tried to chip it, that would be it, job done. The console wouldn't work, or it was impossible. At that time, it wasn't. Now, this is one of the Dreamcast's big problems, is because the games were able to be burnt, people would pirate them, and this is what made them one of the most pirated consoles. If they would have used DVD-R, or DVD-ROM, in the way you would put it, this problem would probably not have happened, or it would have been less frequent. However, it does say the reason that they'd done that was a mistake, because some say it contributed to the Dreamcast's early demise. I'm on the edge of that, really, kind of. However, I do kind of think it was, but in some aspects it wasn't. There was many things that contributed to the demise, and one of the main reasons was just funding. They just physically ran out of funds. They either went bankrupt or they stopped the Dreamcast. That was the only way they was going to stop it, or keep themselves from going bankrupt. Anyway, back on topic now. Now, Sega did try to combat piracy. Now, if you own a Dreamcast and you actually turn it over, you'll see at the bottom it'll have a circle and a number. Now, if you've got number 1, that model of Dreamcast is able to play CDRs. Now, that can be used for backups, piracy, and other stuff. Now, in the time, as you know, as I just said, piracy was quite a problem. What Sega did is, after, I think, 2000, they produced another model, and this was the Sega Dreamcast V2. And what the V2 had is, instead of a 1, a 2, and that stripped completely the mil CD format. Now, you would think, if they took that out, it would be harder to crack. It was, for a time. It was, until eventually everyone cracked it. and they've worked out. Now, I don't know the exact how they corrected it and how it worked out, because I didn't research that, because I'm not really interested in that kind of stuff, how they corrected it, but I do know from obviously a little bit of research that they did eventually correct the Model 2, or it was something to the effect, I think, that someone gave in and told them what it was, because the Dreamcast was failing anyway. So, or it was like something, a text file had been found, or something like that. I'm not 100% sure. However, that is the main specifications. Now, its online services was SegaNet and Dream Arena. Now, Dream Arena was mainly Europe, and I think it was Japan, I could be wrong. And I will actually have a look. SegaNet was used for the Saturn and the Dreamcast. And this, yeah, I think SegaNet was used for, yes, Japan on the Sega Saturn. Which was called, and that was called SegaNet Link in the United States. Now, yes, it was Japan and North America. The Dream Arena was in Europe. Now, there was a lot of stuff to do with that. What basically happened if you... Now, let's say... Now, as we know now, we've got our Xbox Live, our PSN, Nintendo Live we don't have to pay for, but I'll include that. Now, if... At this time, if you use an Xbox Live, I was going to say this day and age, but this time that you use an Xbox Live, you'll get 2 free games of gold, or Xbox One 4 free games of gold, and PSN 2 free games with PS Plus, whatever. Now, at this time, if you was to go, I'm going to get SegaNet for 12 months, and use a console, you would get £200 rebate on your console. Now, the problem with this was, the Dreamcast sales was so bad, when the people that did actually buy them, they went completely for the SegaNet. Once they went for the SegaNet, they got the $200, in that case, back. And Sega made zilch. Now, that is another reason I say they shot themselves in the foot. I could be terribly wrong. I said they shot themselves in the foot because of that. However, in the other perspective, they was trying to make it more enticing, really. And if you don't know SegaNet, they was basically, once the service went offline, or it was shut down, they was basically sent to something called Earthlink. I'm not going to go into that, but it basically went into Earthlink. I'm not going to go into what that is, because I'll be going on forever. Now, Dream Arena was basically the free online service for Europe. Now, Europe had, and I was close with what I said, a 33.6 kilobit a second modem, and the USA had a 56 kilobit per second modem, and it was a dial-up service basically. It was created and operated for Sega Europe by a partnership between ICL, which I don't have a clue what that is, BT, and various ICSPs. Now, I know what BT is, that is British Telecom if I'm correct, which it is, which is basically what my internet services are. ICL is International Computers Limited. It's basically computer software, hardware and services in the UK. Now, it was defunct in 2002. And I think, yeah, its successor was, I'm not going to attempt to pronounce that. And it was acquired basically. If we actually go back, now with Dream Arena, you could get all sorts with it, but however, as I know of, you didn't get the £200 rebate with Dream Arena. So it kind of, yeah, it was kind of like a bit, see what I'm saying? It was like, it's weird to kind of say. It's like, you're a bit like, well, why? But yeah, it's hard to explain, kind of. However, I'll get back onto Sega Dreamcast. Now, the Sega Dreamcast as well, its predecessor, as you know, was the Sega Saturn. Now, if we try and go down, now, if I will go into a little bit of details. Now, Sega partnered with a lot of stuff. Now, I would actually find the code names, because there was many code names for this. I'm not going to go into too much details, however, I'm going to give as much. Dreamcast names, that really didn't help. Sorry, that was my Google being an ass. Right. There we go. Sorry guys. I have like been up like an hour, at the most maybe 2. And Dreamcast was one of the first to have many kind of code names, and I bet you now I've gone on the wrong side. Yes, I have. Now, if you don't know, Dreamcast when it was developed had 2. One was being developed in Japan, one was being developed in USA. Now, as I can remember, and I will tell you once I find out this code name, so I make sure I know what one it was. If I can find it, which I can't. No, it's not known. Let me have a look. I'm gonna find this. Yes, his main code name, I do know that, is Katana. Now, there was 2 other split code names. There was one called Jewel, and there was one called Black Belt, was it? That's Game Raider, wrong side again. I'm trying to find out what one it is. Is this one that I was like, here we go. Right. Now, the Dreamcast had 2. Now, Jewel was Black Belt, basically. Jewel and Shark was code names for the Dreamcast's Black Belt project. White Belt project was Katana and Guppy. Now, as I know of, I'm positive they went for, yeah, the White Belt Dreamcast. That is the one they actually went for. Now, this was due to reasons with the components of the Black Belt Dreamcast. However, the code name Katana was kept, and it was then turned into Katana for the Dreamcast, and then as we know it today, Dreamcast. So, and now there was many differences. I'm not going to go into too many details, but I think there was one difference that one of the companies with the Black Belt project like announced stuff all over the news when there wasn't supposed to, and basically it caused parting of the ways between Sega and that company. Now, on that note, guys, I'm afraid I'm going to have to end. So I'm going to say thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Subscribe if you want to see more great content. Like if you like, dislike if you dislike, comment and let me know what you thought of the video, any video quality improvements, audio quality improvements, or anything in this video that I've asked a question of. Share as much as possible. I'm going to say thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.